There's a massive gold nugget of nutrition, and that is meal prep is a game changer. I guess it wasn't awful. I never ate loads of junk, but he helped me optimize, my nutrition.
And we're live today on Imagine Fitting In, where it's all about mentors, healthy lives, and community. We're here today with Ed Akay from southwestern England, and it's a real privilege to have a guest from over the puddle, that big puddle between us. And I'm excited to learn more about Ed's story. And Ed, this podcast is all about inspiring young lives, young and old. The podcast is, I know there's a lot of people that listen to podcasts. I listen to them very regularly because you can have that long form conversations. You can dial into topics that you identify or love to learn more about. And I feel that what we're looking for in my goal at this podcast is, and I'm almost positive that you're going to be able to provide quite a few of them, but to provide nuggets of little inspiration, knowledge, and just insight to various things. So I'm excited about learning more about your journey. So again, welcome, Ed.
And thank you very much for having me. I feel very honored to be interviewed over the pond, as we say.
So it's a pleasure. So usually, Ed, where I start is I usually ask you, where were you born? Where do you call home today? And how was what did your parents do, and how was that growing up in South?
Of course.
How was that?
Well, I was actually born in southeast England, in a place called Bedford, back in 1983, in the good old days of Reagan and Thatcher. My mum was from northwest England, from a very working class blue collar town called Barnsley. It's synonymous with mines, which got closed down in the 80s. If your viewers Google the 1984 miners' strike, you'll learn a bit about my mum's hometown. It's grim up north, as we say. My dad was from Turkey. He was from, for want of a better word, third world poverty, as it was known then. He came to England in the 60s on a scholarship because he was a very smart guy. And my parents were very much the dictionary definition of working class done good. As, they were living the British dream, if you like, instead of the American dream. They were a success story of people who were underprivileged, who worked hard to eventually get good jobs. My dad was initially in the Turkish military. He ended up a professor. And my mum became a teacher after doing various things. She was one of the first people in her family to ever go to university. So my parents had a fantastic work ethic. Growing up, I had a pretty tough time, which we'll go into later on. I was paralyzed when I was 3, and a lot of my childhood was defined from recovery from paralysis, which I'll talk about in a bit. And I'd probably say that my parents instilled a great work ethic in me. Now, whilst I was born in Bedford, I actually lived all over the country as a kid. I lived near Liverpool. I then lived in southwest England, where I live now, in a place called Sidmouth, where I live in Sidmouth at the moment in southwest England. So I suppose it's the nearest to home. And I lived in northeast England, in a place called Newcastle upon Tyne. Now I lived in Manchester, who's obviously home to the famous Manchester United. Everyone knows who Manchester United are, even if you hate soccer. Right. So I've lived everywhere, really. But I suppose southwest England's really my home.
Okay. And then now you mentioned your father. What did your father end up as a professor, right?
Correct.
What was his area of interest and expertise?
It was chemical engineering. There was a shortage, if you like, of people with that particular skill set in the UK back in the day, just after World War II, and they were looking for people who were going to do quite specific things in science to help rebuild the country. after want of a better word, it was bombed the hell out of
Right.
after World War II. So
Right.
he, if you like, took the opportunity. He had the right skill set, and he fell into it. It was, if you like, his way out of third world poverty.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and your mom, was your mom also very industrious in their studies and stuff, or and did you have brothers and sisters?
Sure. I have a younger sister called Ella, who is now a doctor. And yeah,
Oh,
my
very
mum
nice.
was very much, she was quite an arty person, like your good self. Or I think her main form of art was more the writing arts, things like English, and she ended up teaching English basically. She loved the
Oh,
old
nice.
Shakespeare, and she was a
Okay.
very talented actress.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah,
she had some creative energies, which
God,
then
yeah,
your dad had some, right? That that any kind of engineer, right, is all about details and parameters and structure.
of
So that
course.
sounds like good. It sounds like you and your sister, describing your sister as a doctor. Well, hey, that's no small feat. Um,
Definitely not.
so,
Definitely not.
right. So, when you were, okay, tell us, when you were a kid, um, you mentioned some paralysis. So
Mhm.
obviously, let's talk about, and how old were you when were you born with it? What was the circumstance? And tell us more about that.
Course. Well, I wasn't born with it. I had a very, what might be defined as a fairly happy 1980s childhood up to the age of 3. In 1986, I got diagnosed with an illness called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neurological thing. And it basically paralyzed me completely for 20 days.
How do you
The
spell that?
stress, do you know what? I'm going to get my iPad out because it was actually discovered by a French guy. What I will actually do is taste it. It's actually quite a hard spelling. It's got
Okay,
those accents. I thought, bear with me.
no problem. I'm curious, and I know listeners. It's an educational moment.
Go for it. Okay, so Guillain-Barré syndrome is spelled G for golf,
Yep.
um, U for universe, I for Italy, double L for Lima, A for Alpha, I for Italy, N for November, space, bar, which is spelled B for
Right.
Bravo, A for
Yeah.
Alpha,
ARR. Uh-huh.
RRE, syndrome. Guillain-Barré was the physician who discovered it, so it's named after him. And it's basically a neurological thing,
Hmm.
which effectively, just for want of a better word, to talk in blue collar terms, screws up the nerves,
Okay.
inhibits them, damages them. The highest profile person to ever have it in the UK was a politician called Tony Benn, who, in the context of America, would basically be viewed as our version of Bernie Sanders, to put it in context, that sort of character.
Okay.
And it's said one of your presidents, I think it was Roosevelt, was said to have had it, the guy who was in the wheelchair.
Sure. Like they kind of like, I don't know if he had experienced like polio or whatever.
Yeah,
Some.
no, now there's that story, but a lot of people say it was actually Guillain Barre, but it's not. It's speculation, but he's linked with it definitely.
Got it. Interesting. And so it's just something that's like when somebody experiences this, is it environmental or genetic that exposes itself at that age of 3, or is that
Do
common,
you
or
know
how
what?
that?
No one actually knows. It's classed as a viral infection, but no one actually
Hmm.
knows what's caused it. It's that rare and that obscure, and that was the bizarre thing. We went on holiday to Wales, if I recall. I don't remember it
Uh-huh.
literally, but the story was we went on holiday to Wales. I got a cold, and then it mutated into that. I don't know if the cold was related or not, but that was the story I got given. But I
Right.
am aware it paralyzed me for 20 days, and it was I got given no chance of, if you like, making a full recovery at the time. It was, for want of a better word, pretty damn bleak.
Wow. So there were though, so you had, when you mentioned 20 days, so did your do you remember how you discovered it, or do you remember is your parents tell you stories about what the experience you experiencing?
What I
Excuse me.
remember is just being in hospital and being in bed, because obviously, and I was about 3 years old at the time. I just remember literally just being in hospital in a bed. That's literally all I remember. And
Goodness.
then I got discharged when I got basic movement and put in a wheelchair. And what they said was I wasn't going to really do much. And for want of a better word, my dad refused to accept that. And he did a lot of research into nerve growth because it was essentially about nerve growth as it attacks the nerves.
Right.
He, as a scientist, started researching into nerve growth.
Wow. That's, hey, listen, some of the greatest contributions and discoveries are, I always think of my late father, about he was a very, very self-read man.
Sure.
And to be able to, consume and investigate and understand what knowledge is available. You don't have to go to university to bring yourself up to another level and be competent in an area. So when he found what he found out, what do you recall? Is your dad still with us?
He's still with us, and he'll be watching this podcast because he absolutely buzzes every time I appear and tell the story. He'll be
Oh,
buzzing,
wonderful.
Greg.
And what's your dad's name?
His name's Galip. If
Gallup?
you Google his name, Galip Akay, Galip, surname
Gallup
AKA.
Gallup? Okay.
Yep.
Am I pronouncing that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Gallup Akay, a shout out to you. So thank you. We got a good story to share here. So he took it upon himself. He didn't accept it, did
No.
research. And then what kind of were the steps and stages that kind of went from there?
Sure. Well, I'm going to tell a story now, which in the context of the modern times isn't going to be music to a lot of people's ears. It's going to sound actually borderline cruel and it's going to sound pretty brutal, but this was a very different era and a very
Sure.
different time. So if we have any viewers who may be not necessarily like the bleakest things,
Squeamish?
just take it in the context of the time.
Okay.
So he read research by an Italian Jewish doctor who was a Holocaust survivor who had done experiments on mice and rats. And what this doctor discovered was that if you get a mouse or a rat to become aggressive, if you agitate them, get them angry, their reactions and their nerves grow.
Oh, I know where you're going. Go ahead.
So, well, Greg. So my dad's conclusion was, if I get Ed to be aggressive from his wheelchair, he'll basically develop better. So I was capable of some movement. He got me a punch bag and he made me watch Mike Tyson fights, who obviously was coming to fruition in the around that time. I think it was actually the year he won the heavyweight championship. And he would just get me to hit it and hit it and hit it and get me to be aggressive, antagonize me as a little kid.
Yes.
Again, it's not a very politically correct way of doing medicine by any means, but this was the 1980s. It's a very different time, and it was based on an actual science.
Right.
And then he discovered I'd got better. I gradually got better and better and better. He also made a very controversial decision. He decided he didn't want to register me as disabled, or in the States, as you call it, physically challenged, because he didn't want me to develop a mentality of, oh, I can't do that because I'm disabled. And also it was an era where there was a lot less understanding and empathy. So people were treated like a dirt back then. He didn't want me to have that stigma. Again, this isn't music to people's ears by any means, but it was a very different time. And he kind of brought me up as if I was able-bodied. Now, we got to the point where I could start walking again, if you like. It was a very gradual thing. Initially, doing basic aggressive movements from a wheelchair to walking again.
Step
and then he got me playing sport. And he made me play every type of sport you can imagine. So when I got to if you like, stage 1 of a recovery, he got me to stage 2. and I played able-bodied sport from from a very early age. But I worked around my limitations. I'll give an example. Do you follow soccer, Greg, as you call it?
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, definitely. I can't say I'm a huge fan, but I can definitely appreciate in my background, my fitness background, my professionalism. I can appreciate the athletic requirements, because there's really no better conditioned athlete on the planet than a soccer player, from explosion, speed, endurance, mobility, right? Agility, dynamic movement. It's amazing. But go ahead.
No, sure. Now you've identified something very important about soccer, in that it utilizes a lot of different physical skills, and that was why he made me play it. Now, obviously, it does require a degree of dexterity, and his mentality was, what's the position that requires the least dexterity that you can sort of go by reading the game. So I started playing as a central defender, a position that, if you like, relies on reading the game and being a bit more
Yes.
robust than to being a bit more subtle. So he kind of worked around my challenge by kind of encouraging me to play positions where I was maybe less exposed, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's a bit like, in your American football, if you play as a linebacker, you maybe don't have to have the catching ability of a wide receiver.
Right.
Necessarily. Well, depending which linebacker you are, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
So he kind of got me to sort of do able-bodied sport, but working around what I had the challenge of. Again, it was really, really tough. I ain't going to lie, but I did gradually
Right.
get better and better and better. And it was
And so
fraudulent at the
did you
time.
how old were you when you started playing the soccer, and how long did you end up playing that particular the game of soccer?
Sure, I started playing in 1989, where I was like, being able to walk and run, albeit not great, to be honest. But since about 1989, yeah, I would have been. I got the illness in '86, and I would have been playing soccer about '89ish. We're looking about.
Okay. So were you like 9 or something, or 8 or 6, or how
Uh,
old were you?
be about 6, yeah,
Mm.
6 years old.
How many years did you end up playing soccer?
Probably still play it now, to be honest. Still play as a centre back.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Nice. So that he saw, obviously he saw progress with
Yeah,
you, and okay, so now you're probably, did you call that the position of center back?
yeah,
Is that what
centre
you called
back,
it?
central defender.
Central defender. So I'm sure that's like, if I want you on my team, I need you to be the central defender.
Yeah, definitely. Don't have me as on the wing. Which
Okay.
is like the
So
equivalent of a wide receiver.
okay, right, exactly. Now let's so you're doing this, and are you simultaneously going to just a kind of at your regular local school, or
Yeah,
what's your school days are like? Yeah.
yeah, and it was funny actually. It's about my school days now. They wanted me to register as disabled to get more money for the school, because they used to, in the 1980s. I don't know how it works. So they
Sure.
used to give a certain amount of grants for disabled kids.
Resources. Yes.
And my dad just said to the teachers, "Screw you. I'm not doing that. I'm not agreeing to this. You're not sort of giving him that sort of stigma at the time." And again, I
Yes.
appreciate this doesn't sound very nice, but it was a very different time. And, I appreciate
No,
not all viewers
no,
will approve of this. But
Ed, I will tell you. Ed, I would tell you from, I'm older than you. How old is your dad?
my dad is 80 next year.
80?
Next
Okay.
year, yeah.
Um, okay. Well, I will tell you, I don't know what has conditioned people to be so hypersensitive to another person's desire to be kind of in control and take charge in whatever loving manner way they seem fit for their children, right? And I think it's like I think you're just pointing out, a stem of somewhat of I'm going to say man, I'm not going to, it'd be too broad just to say the problem these days. but it's one of this, mindset that, hey, you work hard, you figure it out, you make decisions on the fly, you make your best decisions, what you know and how you're going to
Sure.
go about it. And obviously, you're speaking me here today, and from a mindset, when we get into more details in your show notes that you share with me are pretty amazing. So it's like he taught you, he not only got you moving, but I feel that he taught you necessary grit and that work ethic, which is, there's no value on that. And so you're in school, you're kind of working in with the regular kids, right? Are you still somewhat fit? How's that neurological, challenge taking place? How does that progress
Yeah, sure. So
in
you've
your
asked a
benefit? Yeah.
fantastic question. Now, it's probably worth saying that today I remain partially paralysed in my left foot, and that was the one thing that didn't fully recover was my left foot. Also, it affected my what might be defined as fine motor skills. I think they're called more subtle movements. So if I was in a boxing ring and I'd done boxing, I would be fine throwing stuff like right straights, but I would be maybe more challenged, bobbing and weaving and doing more subtle things. So I'd
Yes.
probably describe my fine motor skills as not outright terrible. They're not like, I'm not paralyzed in the same way I'm in my left foot, or partially paralyzed. But, it's my,
Right.
they're depleted from what they would have been had I not had Guillain-Barré syndrome, if that makes sense. They're a reasonable
Well, I
level
will.
of what they would have been.
Right. At this time, I'll give your dad big round of applause. Quite the man. Good job. Because, you are a dynamic, I can say young man because you're probably younger than me.
I am 41. I'm
So
not
this
young.
is, yeah, I got 20 years on you, so you could be my son. But that being said, when I came across, and we'll get to more of it, I came across your Winning Mr. Natural Universe, whatever, which was really cool. But let's jump back into spec. When you're in school, did you, dealing with this situation, when you were a kid, did you have like an early childhood, like dream or kind of any kind of idea, like where, what you wanted to do, or you're just being the regular kid, dealing with the situation, improving? And did you have your mind's eye or your heart, your little childhood heart set somewhere?
That's a very good question. So I spent a lot of my childhood, obviously, in virtually all my spare time was spent on getting better and improving my coordination and improving my motor skills. So that was literally it. It would it would make me do sport all the time. So that was most of it. In terms of childhood ambition, I had a few things actually. I was interested at one point of becoming a politician, believe it or not. But I went off that at a later date because I'm by nature quite outspoken. And if you're a politician, in the UK, not so much in the US actually, not so much in the US, you cannot get away with being too outspoken if you're a politician in the UK, in my view. You can in the US though.
Okay, so you're
In
saying
my
that,
view.
in your view, like in terms of when you say outspoken, like ready just to rip it off and say what you mean and feel, and that's how that's form of kind of communication. If you talk about when on America we see that parliament type, right, and these people are standing up and they get to just voice it out and just be hardcore. It seems like there's no emotion spared. Whereas I think what I'm registering with you, like in America, everybody's like walking on glass, trying to say something to get a point across, but you can see like there's other influences upon them. Like, do I have that right?
No, that's true. And I put it this way, I would say Donald Trump would never get elected in the UK. And probably in the same way, our Prime Minister Keir Starmer probably would struggle in the US. Because if you look at, say, Keir Starmer, he's quite a wooden character who really does sort of take walking the line to an extreme, if you like, the way he comes across. He has a rep as literally sitting on the fence, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yes.
And it's just the nature of British politics. Like, if Trump was in the UK. I can't imagine someone like that getting elected, but he would in the US, if that makes sense. That's how I perceive it anyway.
Okay, so there is a place for extremes, but you have to be a little centrist to really keep in the game with the other competitors of the English, right? Politicians. That makes sense,
Definitely.
Mike?
Definitely.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
got it.
100%. I mean,
Okay.
if you look at the guy who was before Starmer, Rishi Sunak, he wasn't that much different from Starmer, really. You know, he was very much
Okay.
a centrist. Probably the most out there prime minister we've had is Boris Johnson, who,
Yes.
yeah, he's probably the most out there one we ever produced. The rest are fairly tame. Like, you know,
Yeah.
Tony Blair obviously had charisma, but really he never he didn't really rock the boat that much in the UK. Well, not domestically anyway. Obviously,
Right.
in terms of domestic policy, not so much foreign policy. But yes, so I mean, what I
Okay.
did discovered is that as unlike a lot of people in the UK, I probably do speak my mind a bit too much. I discovered that if I was to be a politician in the UK, it wouldn't necessarily suit me as a person. So I became interested in other stuff. And
Gotcha.
as I got older, I realized, you know what, actually, I like the idea of just being an entrepreneur and just working for myself and, you
Yeah.
know, going my own path. And that's what sort of led me into sort of the business world, the ability to
Okay.
sort of work for myself and be more authentically myself and not having to worry about, you know, what someone above me thinks. That's very important for me,
Right.
individuality.
Yeah. Okay. So, where do you remember in school? The Imagine Fitting In podcast is all about it's telling these stories about how other people influenced you in your life and like mentors. Did you ever
Of
have a
course.
particular teacher or individual that was like that really kind of turned your head and either supported you or like helped steer you to a direction that you still remember today?
No, sure. When I was in secondary school or high school, as you would call it, I had two English teachers, Mr. Bush and Mr. Smith, who realised I was by nature quite an outside the box person. And they kind of would always encourage me to sort of go into roles of leadership to develop me when other teachers who were maybe, you know, more, shall we say, conservative in their outlook, you know, more traditionalist in terms of education, didn't
Right.
necessarily click with me, but them two sort of saw potential in me and genuinely believed in me, like Mr. Smith, one of the English teachers, made me sports captain because he recognised that I had a lot of tenacity. And he said, yeah, you might not be the best athlete, but God, you're tenacious as hell.
Right. Trying
And
to like
that was really good for me.
got help kind of frame a potential structure to look at for you with all that energy so you can
Mm-hmm.
start channeling, right? To be, productive for yourself. But obviously, being productive in life, obviously, um, you're going to be more, obviously, we're more recognized and recognized and I want to say honored, but taken seriously from how much that affects the big picture, not just thinking about you. So, I know when kids are teenagers, right, they can be rebellious. They have some ideas and, being selfish doesn't get us really anywhere. Again, it's like the old thing when you're coming of age, you have potential confusion, anxiety, like this and that. You obviously had a very interesting upbringing and perspective that probably both charged you up and humbled you at the same time,
Definitely.
probably making you even more mature. So, and look in retrospect, that I'm assuming it probably made you even more stronger. And then, so after you get this, you said Mr. Smith?
Yeah, it was Mr. Smith. Yeah, God
Is it
bless
Mr. Smith?
him.
Okay. And so, then at this stage in the game, like, what did you now? So you're in what do you call that? Second level school, high school type thing? What do you call
Secondary
it? Second
school.
level or secondary school?
Yeah.
So when you finish up secondary school, do you have your head is in a place where you know exactly where you're heading for the next direction, or you had
Yeah.
a kind of idea, like a
No, sure. So my basic idea was this: I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a degree um, in in some form of social science. I ended up doing politics and social policy. It's because even though I decided I didn't really want to be a politician, I was still interested in it, and I was aware that that particular sort of degree, it could have jobs in other fields, whether journalism, communication, anything like that, really. So I went and did a
Right.
degree in politics and social policy. Whereas actually, as an undergrad, I presented a paper about Middle East politics over in Germany, believe it or not, about Turkey and the Middle East, actually, if I recall. Yeah, it's about 2003 sort of time, be about 19-ish, 20-ish.
Okay. Because obviously your dad was from Turkey originally, so you have some
Yeah,
background knowledge and kind of firsthand experience of that.
definitely. And it was basically about Turkey's role in the Middle East as it was then. Obviously, circumstances have changed a lot since 2003. So it was more about how Turkey was in that sort of era.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Now,
but
did your go ahead.
no, I was going to say, yeah, go ahead.
So your dad used quite a few methods, got you going. Soccer. So was soccer the like that long kind of like that long term is like, oh, you hit that mark where we're really seeing you're doing better and better. Was there any other necessary need that your dad came up with, any kind of scenario stuff for you to try to even improve more, or was that getting into playing soccer, was that enough to kind of propel you past the bulk of that challenge?
Well, he made me do combat sports as well, like judo, some basic level
Okay.
boxing, because they're related to increasing aggression. Both of them, he got me doing them, and also for self defense, because kids can be pretty cruel.
Right.
And he always taught me that if somebody says something disparaging to you, if you have to defend yourself physically, do it. Again, not necessarily the most popular thing nowadays, but
Right.
this was old school.
Well,
He taught
there's a
me,
time. Yeah. There's a time and place for everything.
of course,
And then it sounds like your dad was also a very competent individual to like say, okay, you have these tools, how to use the tools, decide when to use what. And, again, I can only imagine that if you had kind of an initial interest in public service or like a politician, then, you have to be somewhat disciplined and also, what's the word I'm looking for? Strategic
yeah,
in
very much
your,
so.
right? Right. So did your, after the combat sports, when, did you, what was competing like, in your notes, you mentioned you competed both in able-bodied and para
Yeah,
athletic events?
yeah, I have. Now this is where it gets very strange. Now, I've always trained as an able-bodied athlete. Believe it or not, I've always worked around, the partial paralysis in my left foot. I played
Right, like
soccer,
just
but
discounting, like I'm just going to go as hard as I can. Yeah.
yeah, go for it. I I trained as an able-bodied athlete. Did soccer able-bodied, did running able-bodied. I competed in a national university championship. Did athletics at quite a high level. I did the shot put, actually, funnily enough. Fast forward a
Nice.
few years, I got into bodybuilding, and I entered a regular body
Okay.
competition. And after the competition, I did all right in it. I held my own for my first competition. Nothing particularly spectacular, nothing bad. The organizer, we're talking
Yeah.
about this year, the organizer said to me, look, I've done my due diligence on you. I've read about you on the internet. I know about your particular challenge in your left foot. And obviously, it's fair to say, as in bodybuilding, you're barefoot. In real life, I wear, trainers or basketball boots to help mitigate the partial paralysis in my left foot. I couldn't do that on a bodybuilding stage. So we could tell I was obviously fighting that on a stage. You know, whilst I could hold my own, it was obvious to a judge who's used to more subtle details that there was an issue of some sort. But as it wasn't maybe too in your face, you know, it's not too obvious. You know, he had to sort of ask me a bit. And it's not exactly a nice conversation to ask about. So he said, look, I've done my research because my backstory was on the net by then. I hope this doesn't sound patronising or anything, but we really wanting to do para bodybuilding. Would you be interested in competing in the World Championship, but as a para athlete, but also actually entering the regular able-bodied comp as well? And I thought, wow, this is a bit not what I expected. So I messaged him back and I said, look, I'm not registered disabled. You know, I do have that particular issue, and it's still obvious. It's obvious on a bodybuilding stage that maybe my left foot's not necessarily the best. Would I qualify? He goes, yeah, you do, definitely. I said, all right, I'll do it then. So we're talking about June this year, I went to the World Natural Bodybuilding Championship in the Netherlands, and I entered their para division, and I entered their masters division over 40s, held my own in the masters, and I won silver in the para. And then after the para, I entered the natural version of Mr. Universe and ended up winning the para this time. And this was basically off the back of effectively getting scouted for it. And it did feel quite surreal because having sort of lived with that and then having to almost confront it again, actually, all those years later, that felt really weird, actually, but not in a bad way. Life as they say.
Well, you know, I will tell you, because I started, you know, I think we talked a little bit before we got on the recording about all my experience in my careers and what I dabble in quite a few different things. But I started first in advertising and marketing and design as an artist and all that stuff. But as a, you know, again, I compliment, you know, the promoter, right? You're always looking for something to set yourself apart in a story. Yours is an inspiring story. So from the days of your father, God bless him, great man, as far as I'm concerned, that had the hindsight to see your that your mentality and your character and your essence and your mind was much even more important than the physicality of it. So this fueled you, and that using your body, and I appreciate, you know, that competition. I never competed in bodybuilding, but I used bodybuilding as a character development tool for myself.
Of course.
And a sense of strength. And I think I've shared this on my just most recent episode 19, that I was kind of, you know, I was a kid that was anxious. For whatever reason, I was distracted when my youth. I come to realize not even until like I'm almost 52 years old that I'm on my reading that I self-diagnosed myself with that. I'm probably classic ADHD.
Sure.
And it was the journey of just throwing myself into different areas of interest that my true intelligence was able to come out. Through bodybuilding, I gained a sense of grounding, knocking out some excessive energy, and being able to structure and focus and compartmentalize. And so my journey leaving advertising and getting into fitness as a hobby, I found myself on the fitness floor. You know, asked myself that one time, I said, if I had all the money in the world, and what would I, when I get out of bed every morning, what I want to go do? Well, I found myself wanting to help people in the gym because I was feeling so empowered about my experience and what that gave me in the physical plane, that it helped me propel me to give me the confidence to go be a fitness professional and leave the advertising world. And then that just propelled me into other avenues of opportunity, meeting all kinds of people from all kinds of places around the world and around the country. that gave me opportunities to help develop my interest. And again, that's a little bit my story. But getting back to your experience, I think that's a fantastic story that you're sharing, which is awesome, because the mental side of that, ultimately, it doesn't matter if you are considered, a para athlete
Of
or
course.
in the, what we, in terms of like, straighten this competition that you have right down the line there. I applaud you for competing with both, realizing that it doesn't make a difference. It only
Definitely.
it makes a difference in terms of how you ingest it and react to it. And then obviously this promoter saw something, an opportunity, and I guess you're, even got to a point where you've been working with some like projects with a photographer, Jason, is it Reading or
Yeah,
Redding?
Jason Redding. Yeah, me old mate Jason. All right, Jason.
Jason
I know you'll be
Redding.
watching Jason, and
Okay.
Jason absolutely buzzes every time I
Okay.
promote him.
So shout out to Jason Redding. And he's I understand he did some photographs or did a calendar, and then there's some book. Tell us about these
Yeah,
projects that you have going on.
no, definitely. So myself and Jason, we go back a long way. Been working together for 3-4 years. Probably best to describe our chemistry as a classic introvert and extrovert. So we gel well. Jason is a techie. If he was here
Okay.
now, he would be probably giving us every sort of technical advice to improve things. It's very much what he's like, but in a good sort of way, of course. Whilst I'm
Yeah.
more of a promotion sort of person, so we gel well because we've got complementary skills. Now, Jason, what he did actually, he's got a studio in another part of southwest England to where I live, a place called Chard, which is in a county. It's not, it won't be that one in America, but it's in Somerset. Most famous resident of Somerset is the famous author. Well, when he was alive, and it was a guy called Terry Pratchett. You know the author, Terry Pratchett.
Terry who?
Pratchett.
It kind of sounds, yeah. What's he known for? Is he known for a particular book or style of writing?
He wrote what are called the Discworld novels. They're like fantasy novels. He was absolutely massive in the 90s and noughties. Basically, he's no longer with us, but he was really
Okay.
famous back then.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, Somerset's, it's not necessarily the best known county in the UK, but it's a very beautiful rural county. He has a home studio, and to
Okay.
celebrate I think it's the 4th or 5th anniversary. He's released a calendar of images which have starred myself to boost his business.
Oh,
We've done
nice.
quite a lot of stuff together over the years. We've had, over 30 magazine covers together worldwide.
Nice.
And earlier this year, the guy genuinely shocked me. About 2 years ago, he said, "Ed, I'm going to write your biography." And I thought, all right then,
Well,
Jason.
so he's a photographer and a writer.
He is, yeah. He's multi-talented as our Jason. And he says to me about two
Wow.
years ago, "Yeah, I'm going to write your biography." And he interviewed me, and I thought, I don't think much is going to come of this. I wasn't sure,
Yes.
what if he'd ever do it. Anyway, earlier this year, he goes, "Ed, I've written your biography." And I'm like, "What?" And I get this photographic book passed to me, via PDF format, which talks about my
Yes.
childhood, my upbringing, full of photos we've taken together over the years, and we're looking to
Oh my
release it next
goodness.
year. So I was absolutely
Nice.
shocked. It was shocking, but in a good way.
So wait,
Completely shocked.
you knew okay, you've been mates since how old? You guys were how old?
Um, well, when we first met, I'd be in my late 30s. Jason's about 10 years older than me. And
Okay.
I saw this biography. I was 41. Yeah, earlier this year when I saw it, I was like, "What have I just read? You've written my biography."
So he mentioned that he wanted to write your biography. You're
Hello.
kind of busy with other things, and you're like, okay, and all of a sudden he surprises you, like, okay, I'm finished, and here it is, and you get this PDF, and you're looking through it. Would that make you? How'd that make you feel, man?
I was shocked, to be honest. I was shocked, but I was honoured. I was very humbled, actually, because I kind of think, well, look, I've not had a boring life, but I wasn't sure if it warranted someone writing my bio. If I was honest, I didn't think I quite deserved it. Well, I'm not a boring person by any means, but God, for someone to go and do that. And he wrote it from a very unique perspective. What he said was it was done from the perspective of how a photographer met a model and their journeys collided at the same sort of time, and how, if you like,
Right.
we inspired each other in very different ways. I think Jason would probably say I got him more motivated and more driven, whilst he helped me get a lot better at posing and he helped me fine tune a few things. So it was very much a mutual skill exchange.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It sounds like a wonderful collaboration. Timing, there's got to be saying something about timing. And then, there's baseline probably character traits of work ethic and creativity. And, that's just a beautiful collaboration. I myself, I have, I've done many things. I mentioned to you that I started out as a graphic designer in art. I'm so old that I was working in the advertising industry in Chicago before computers. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
old. I saw them come in. I wasn't really satisfied, so I ended up getting into the fitness industry. I'm a fitness professional for 32 years.
Sure.
Getting that confidence, I even propelled me to even train trainers. Now I wrote a program that's recognized by National Academy of Sports Medicine on balance. I'm a balance specialist, a neurological, basically I do a lot of neuromuscular training, and I like to think that I'm a movement specialist. So but I want to highlight the fact that no matter what age, right? That exchange, you guys were your characters and your pluses and your minuses of what you believe that you bring, right? Everybody doesn't have everything, and we need supportive, mechanisms in terms of friends, and if you want to say quote unquote mentors, they can be of any age. So it's just a beautiful relationship where back and forth exchange, where you guys were literally both mentoring each other, inspiring and supercharging, and being able to create an avenue for your vehicles and yourselves, right, in your work to be, discovered and explored. And this is what's really I love about interviewing people from around the world. I've trained and interviewed people for over 30 years about
Wow.
like the most intimate, like, your physical health. What do you do? What do you want? I've met a lot of characters and a
Okay.
lot of very interesting people from around the world, and I wouldn't trade it for an instant. And I find, talking with you fascinating. I just love people. And again, it goes back to, I will share the reason that this podcast exists. It's a passion project of mine.
You can tell. It really
Um,
comes out,
uh,
actually.
I lost our family. We lost our nephew to addiction.
Sorry.
And you could say slash mental health. And so the idea of me being a fitness professional, Ed, I always wanted to start a podcast, and I didn't really know what, I didn't want to start a fitness podcast because I don't want to try to compete in that worldwide whatever. So I thought, like, what's special to me? What has made my life special and rewarding and especially inspiring for me? So, my tagline is inspire young lives. Is that my many mentors that I've had over my life, and everybody can count on one hand at least people who have influenced you and helped steer you along. So I'm getting back to like the fact that I was started as my essence, I'm an artist. My passion is fitness. I started as a graphic designer. I got into fitness. I became a fitness educator of other trainers. I end up, starting to play the drums at 50. I've been singing
Wow.
for over 25 years for my own meditation salvation. I became a certified drone pilot over COVID. I've all been a longtime photographer, obviously, so I'm a very creative guy. And now having this podcast, and I'm getting to a point where I would love to have, I'm going to write a book as well. And so I've got I want to do a documentary, a book, and maybe even do some stand-up comedy.
Oh, wow.
Just talking about life and world, because I think people, that's this, my bucket list is big. So this projects that you're doing, I just want to share that, I hope to inspire people to not stop learning,
Of course.
be open to developing some new opinions. Just because you have certain experiences doesn't mean the total world operates like that. And you have to keep an open mind and an
Definitely.
open heart and compassion. And I think that the arts, and like obviously Jason is obviously a very creative person. He's using these vehicles of photography and the written word. Fantastic. You are out there on the front line being somebody that's obviously a vehicle and a story, which is fantastic. Now, when the essence, so it's a biography, is the calendar out? Is the book out? When is that?
The calendar's out and it's available from Jason's website, www.jasonreddingphotography.com. Jason, man, I plugged you.
Okay.
And
We'll get all you guys' information and all your links and stuff. We'll put that on the podcast, no problem.
no, brilliant.
So good. It's like, it sounds like you guys are like the truest of mates, and that's a beautiful situation. So now let me ask you, what are some of the less, you've had people that have been influential in your life.
Of course.
Your dad, bar none, is like at the top of the list in terms of just spearheading your journey.
Definitely.
What lessons have you learned? What lessons have you learned about being mentored? And are you mentoring anybody now? Or you've been aware of like how much you potentially can influence people?
Sure, that's a fantastic question, Greg. One lesson I learned from somebody who I view as one of my best friends and also mentors, from my trainer, Matthew White. And Matthew runs a company called NW Strength and Performance, who have very kindly sponsored me throughout my bodybuilding. He's coached me. I always talk about what a great influence he has on me. And I think the main thing, actually, he taught me whilst mentoring me was, whilst I had a fantastic mindset, he taught me it was a massive gold nugget of nutrition, and that is meal prep is a game changer. For those that don't know, meal prep is where you literally plan what you're going to eat in advance.
Yes.
Before I met him, my diet wasn't terrible by any means, but him teaching me to eat in
but it wasn't optimal. He showed
it
you
was
optimal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you've hit the nail on the head, Greg. Yeah, so it wasn't awful. I never ate loads of junk, but he helped me optimize, my nutrition. And learning that quite basic thing, meal prep, eating at certain times, eating certain portions at certain times, was an absolute game changer.
Yes.
So I'd actually say, in terms of mentoring, whilst I think my mindset came from my dad, the fine tuning of the mentoring at a later age actually came from Matt. That thing about meal prep, eating at a certain time, calculating the nutrition to the, like under a microscope. God, that's a game changer. And
Yes.
we all need mentoring in something. And in my case, I needed to sort of learn to optimize nutrition. Before I met Matt, my nutrition knowledge was a bit like this, Greg. Protein, good. Carbohydrate, bad. Sugar, very bad. Fat can be bad, but it can be good depending on what it is. It was very primitive. That taught me some fantastic knowledge.
Nice. Now, when you're reminding me of how, like, when I talk to my clients, okay, when I first talk to them, number one, I say, everybody knows they need to be hydrated. They know what a sensible diet is, right? They know when they're not eating correctly. But the one of the things I mainly say is this: I say it's not what you're eating, it's what you're not eating on a regular basis.
Definitely.
And number two, the timing and structure of your days and your meals, as you mentioned, is critical as the timing that you're going to go to bed at a certain time at night, waking up the same time, having that structure. Because you can talk for days on amounts of protein and carbs, and you can talk for days on a number of meals. But if you're not empowered to have a structure or baseline, you really can't adapt and make changes. Oh, all of a sudden I want to gain weight. I want to gain the right kind of weight. Oh no, I want to really cut back but not lose my muscle mass. So in terms of that fine tuning, your trainer, his name's Matt, correct?
Yeah, Matthew White of MW
Matthew.
Strength and
All right.
Performance. Yeah.
So, that is like, we know it's so key, because other thing I tell my clients, I say, listen, if you feel like you're lethargic, you feel like you're overweight, do you feel like you can't concentrate, you're not at your optimal potential self, that something's declined as we get older, then look at that, just that structure of consistency, and just taking time to be responsible to, like you said, a meal prep, knowing what you're ingesting, basically where it came from, and all your food is not being fed to you on a last minute basis, on a convenience for you, because that food's out there for a profit margin for somebody else serving you up so-called nutrients. You know what I
Definitely
mean?
true. Definitely true.
Right? So when you hone in on that, it's the details, right? The details matter. So when you change your diet, I'm assuming that your energy, your concentration, your ability to perform, your to rest and all that, how'd that affect you when you change your diet so drastically?
Well, funnily enough, actually, I used to suffer from IBS. Very, very pleasant image
Oh,
there. Irritable bowel syndrome.
yep.
Very, very lovely thought, isn't it? Literally,
Well,
I kid you not. Within a week of, I started working with Matt 4 years ago. He literally,
and just settle down.
yeah, within about a week, it was absolutely nuts, Greg. That was the main thing. Also, I would say overall that my relationship with food is a lot better, in that I very, very naturally know when's it, when I sort of need to have more or need to have less.
Yes.
I do it very instinctively, and definitely. And but I think the good thing is, though, I don't actually eat anything I didn't eat before. Just the main thing is I eat it in a much more structured way, because I used to eat lots of chicken and turkey before I did bodybuilding. I would have, rice instead of bread anyway. So it wasn't like a massive diet overhaul. I
Right.
do feel quite blessed actually, because in the 1980s, my dad actually worked for quite a big food manufacturer, and he became
Hmm.
really anti-processed food. So I was very blessed that my dad didn't bring me up on processed food, because he saw all the crap they were putting in it at the time back in the
Right.
80s. So in a way, I mean,
Excuse me.
Matt says to me he's never had any problems in getting me to sort of stick to a diet, because that was already there, and I never ate crap before anyway. I just
Right.
didn't have the knowledge how to sort of optimize it, as you've hit the nail on the head, Greg.
Yeah, and you're kind of pointing out to a couple things of I thought about as balance and trust. So, I'm not sure if you're, this podcast Imagine Fitting In. My moniker is you can find me at thebalanceprofessor.com. Um all things balance, and when we're talking about balance, somebody goes, "Oh, I can balance," and they want to stand on one foot. And I'm like, "Okay. Uh we're talking about balance of power on a physiological standpoint,
Yeah,
and then a balanced perspective on nutrition, a balanced perspective on rest, a balanced perspective on time off, right? Relaxation, a time off with nature and the sunshine in your face. That kind of like find that what I tell my clients, we're looking to we're look you look we're looking I'm going to looking to help you create your ultimate fitness cocktail. Is it shaken, not stirred? What ingredients are you ingesting, how much and when, and like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be rocket science and overwhelming, but what comes into play, which you kind of uh, talked about there, is that trust of the instinctual, the more you begin to trust how you feel every day. You have that structure you play off of, and it may modify a little bit here and there, but it's basically a structure that you're settling into. And then I'm sure, you obviously results speak for themselves. You achieved and won awards and competitions. That's not easy. It takes discipline, which I think that's a great thing to share in general with people, that like mindset, discipline, and a focus in that dietary, like your IBS. It was just, you described it. You were taking your nutrition to extremes, right? And you just had to kind of, like your boy Matt just balanced that out and gave you another perspective oversight. And that's what I think that, just this conversation that we're having now, right? I love having these interviews and talking to new people, because there's not one conversation that there's not a nugget, right, produced that's very almost invaluable, that can be some things we talk about right now, can just like spark somebody that's watching to say, oh, that little nugget of change, oh, maybe that's where I need to go. Or, man, he's inspiring me to look at my life more and appreciate what I have to, I can get to the gym, right? So I used to make a joke with my clients. I said, there are a million reasons to not go to the gym, or not to take care of yourself and like go move, right?
Yeah.
But there's only one reason to, because there's only one reason, and that's because it's powerful for you. But you can come up with a million reasons why you shouldn't do it. Just, make that decision that that physiological plane, I believe, is key in all states of health, performance, mental aptitude, right? Complementing your long game, quality of life. And that's what I bring to my clients over here in the US, and I'm in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, home of aviation. Woo. And I do a lot of pain management work. I do a lot of work with I specialize in post-rehab fitness strategy, or I specialize in people trying to get them to have them avoid surgery for the longest time.
Very
Because
wise.
most people don't want to go underneath a knife, right? Because once you go underneath the knife, you're never the same.
Definitely.
Ever, right? So I try to, that's where my niche is. I've trained high-end athletes, young and old, recreational. I've trained stroke victims, people from all kinds of hip replacements, knee replacements, you call it shoulder replacements, or trying to, again, stay away from the knife. But getting back to you and in mentoring in your world and stuff, like, how would you describe your like current, because you're obviously, you said you went to school, did you study law?
Yeah, I did a postgrad in law. What happened was, after university, and this was in the noughties, I didn't go straight into a graduate job because there wasn't many going at the time. So I basically discovered law can get you a stable income. So I did a postgrad in law in the mid noughties. After that, I worked in employment law for a period of time, and then got
Mm-hmm.
into property development, if you like, because I think after you earn a certain amount of money, there's only so much you can do with, only so much crap you can buy, for want of a better word. So I started
Right.
putting my money into property, and I then basically got into property development and realised actually I like being an entrepreneur. I like working for myself because I'm quite a free spirit by nature. So
Yeah.
I then just realised, I want us to be in the entrepreneurial world. So I did property development, and then started doing employment law consultancy as an entrepreneur. Just working for myself. I've recently got into
Fantastic.
PR. Done e-commerce, done a lot of things. I think what it is, I just like being my own boss. Ultimately, I don't like towing the
Right.
line, Greg, and I bet you don't either.
No, you got it. You hit that head right on the nail. Let me ask you, how do you describe your best way of approaching like building professional relationships? Like, so do your percentage of like into like law consulting, property development, your personal, physical endeavors and how that calendar and the book is going. How do you build professional relationships?
Well, my first ever sort of studenty job was actually a door-to-door salesman. So I actually approach people directly, say who I am, what I'm about, and it's a numbers game. I'm very much a believer in the law of averages and a numbers game. You've got to roll with the
Right.
punches, take rejection. And
Yeah.
and you know what? I'll give a golden nugget now. Parents, if you've got kids, make them be a door-to-door salesman, even if it's for a week, or be a
Yeah.
cold caller. They will learn so much. They'll learn how to handle abuse. They'll learn how to handle rejection, and they will learn how to think on their feet. Golden nugget: be a salesperson, even if your
There
kid
you
absolutely
go.
hates it.
Yeah, great advice, because we know that, and especially like having somebody's, standing in front of somebody face to face, right? In terms of how we have this technology, where it's like, oh, it's so convenient. We can look, we can talk to people, blah 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 blah, but then we're not really talking to them.
No.
What um let me ask you. So currently, right now, what does self-care look like for you in terms of how much do you put that in like your daily life? Do you have like a strong segment of each day that you put around your physical well-being in terms of like exercise or meditation or stretching and all that kind of stuff? And compared to like your business world now, like in your
Oh, definitely.
entrepreneurial
I
stuff.
mean, what I do actually, I get up very early. I tend to get up about 5 a.m., have a quick meal, and then work out literally straight away for about an hour. I do that every day apart from a rest day, and then I might train again in the evening.
Got it.
Um, I, I very much do it first thing. I'm very much a morning person by nature. I'm not one
Yeah.
of those people who sort of stays up till, stupid o'clock. I'm very much early to bed, early to rise. In a nutshell, Greg, I'm a bit boring like that.
Well, you know what? I listen. You have a structure and a personal template that is obviously complementing your world. You're a dynamic guy, and so I applaud you for that. And that structure gives you a vehicle, continuing vehicle. Like I feel like I've been blessed with understanding my potential now, and that
Hmm.
one of the things that you mentioned, and I um, what was that? Was this a thought I just had, that when you mentioned getting early, when you get up early, right? There's a couple things happening. Obviously, this is just general uh, advice for the average consumer or people that work out or not work out. When you do it early, right? You're doing when you in the morning. Your breakfast is you're breaking the fast. So,
Yeah,
like you said, you wake up and you have like a little something, whatever, hydrate, and you just go at it. You are mentally and physically the strongest you're going to be the entire day. So you take that on that physical plane, right? Workout, exercise, take
yeah.
care of that physical structure. And I found some of my best ideas come when I am distracted, like being in my physical plane, and you step away and your mind is not trying to figure out everything that it's on your mind. Because sometimes, right, when you step away from something, you see clarity. So I believe that's a really powerful thing, and that's probably one of the best pieces of advice as we round up this conversation. That in general, right? Listen, structure. Um, the You're going to decide what level of discipline, if it's important enough to you. I'll share something that I mentioned this in my other podcasts. When I was growing up, I was a little lean, thin kid. I was a great street ball wide receiver because I had a neighbor that had a hell of a arm, American football,
Joe Montana,
and played. Yeah, loved
more
playing all
Dan
these
Marino.
sports, right? Yeah, loved playing all these street sports. For whatever reason, I got heavy as a kid. Who know? That's a long story. Anyway, I and then that combined that with that anxiousness. So when I finally went to university, I took a weight training class. I saw some guy working out in the mirror, like, man, that's what I want. And I come across an article in the Rolling Stone magazine, and it was an interview of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he basically said, and I wrote this on my wall every day when I open my closet. He says, if it means enough to you, you'll make it happen. If it doesn't happen, obviously it doesn't mean enough to you. So, that's why in my podcast and here in this conversation, Ed, you are definitely an inspiration,
Thank you.
Example of adversity, beyond the norm, which we know, growing up in this world, being a teenager, finding yourself, and we all have different circumstances, but it's it sounds like a wonderful growth project that you have. And I'd like to think that we in our conversation have produced quite a few nuggets for listeners. And I'm looking, like I said, I always tell my listeners and my guests, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I'm confident that I have when I have sincere conversation and I'm trying to learn more about others, I learn more about myself. And I know that to ramp that up and spread the word like that is a powerful thing, that in the world today, we need more of that, and not to despair so much, to create more optimism. And stories like this definitely juice that optimism, which I think that is all beneficial for us and the entire humanity. So I want to thank you so much, Ed, for joining us today on Imagine Fitting In. Please, I will be in touch with you. We'll be in contact. Obviously, I'll let you know when the episode releases. And, please feel free to recommend anybody that might have interest on twofold, on potentially thinking that they'd like to share their story on my platform, and or other podcasters that they think they might find me interesting as a guest.
Sure.
So
No,
that's
I'd love
kind
to,
of an open
Greg.
invite duel. Yep. So again, Ed, thank you so much. I know that, again, like I said, plenty of nuggets. Really appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
And thank you very much, Greg. And I'm really honoured for your time and, meeting such a dynamic and charismatic guy like your good self. Thank you again.
All right. Okay, so we're going to wrap this episode up. All right, kids. Till next time. See ya.
Professor.